House of Forum to the IT Governance Day on managing cybersecurity risk. Before I go any further, just thank you to our sponsors. I encourage you in the breaks to go and say hello to them yourselves, sponsors and partners, all of whom have exhibition stands and intelligent, knowledgeable people ready to talk to you in the area down to the right-hand side next to where the food and buffet is. Particularly visit the ITGP bookshop. There's a collection of incredibly interesting, exciting and fun books for you to pick up, read, browse, take home. If you still haven't gone on holiday, they're ideal for reading on the airplane and on the beach. Information security risk management is a winner for the beach. Before I go on, just a brief introduction. My name is Alan Calder, for those of you who don't know me. My background is in business. I'm not a technologist, I'm not a security person. I'm simply a business person who understands that managing cybersecurity risk is an effective way for most organizations of creating a competitive advantage and adding value to the business. I set IT governance up about 7 or 8 years ago because I recognized that in dealing with information security and IT issues, it was important that business people and IT people had access to a range of products and services that were designed to help businesses succeed rather than which were sold on the more traditional collection of fear, uncertainty and doubt. So we as a company, IT Governance, we specialize in enabling organizations to address any particular aspect of the governance of IT, from cybersecurity right the way through to IT service management, in whatever way happens to suit your culture and approach. So we have products, options and services for people who want to do it themselves, who want to go on training courses, who want to get consultancy help, who want to blend or mix of all of those things. And if you want to find out more about how we can help you address particularly cybersecurity, if you look for my colleagues in the audience, they're all wearing these exciting IT governance badges. They're friendly, excited, keen to be talking to you. Do grab the opportunity to chat with them. So just a little bit of background before I move into the agenda for the day and the overall keynote presentation. My own background, I was born in South Africa quite a long time ago. What you might call my ancestral home is there around about Johannesburg, not in the aeroplane, but actually in Johannesburg. And one of the places that growing up as a privileged white person you got to go and do was visit somewhere like the Kruger National Park. And I lived in South Africa until I had a fairly major disagreement with the apartheid government and had to leave, and visited Kruger Park quite often. The Kruger National Park, for people in South Africa then and still, it's one of the largest single game reserves in the world. It's got a wide range of the type of game and animals you would expect to find in the African bush. You arrive, typically we would arrive at what's called the Numbi Gate. It was one of the main gates on the south side of the Kruger National Park. And you'd be led by a set of rules, things that you should and shouldn't do when you go into the Kruger National Park. The basic rules are drive on the roads. Don't go heading off through the bush thinking that you're a major bushwhacker. Drive on the roads, pay attention, stay in the motor car. There are good reasons you live in South Africa for following those rules. Predators also use the roads. That's a leopard having a stroll along a main road near the Lumbi Gate late one afternoon. Predators use the roads, don't get out of the car because predators, they're predators. They eat people and things. Big cats are really big. You kind of learn that lions are not friendly little things that you can get out and have a chat and a cuddle with. They're serious animals. You learn that buffalo are not really that peaceful. They might stand around in large herds looking fairly calm and relaxed, but buffalo are capable of taking on and killing lions. You learn that some animals probably won't like you, even if you're in a car and on the road. Some animals get irritated and they come and stomp on the car or chase you away. You've got to be aware of that. And you're also told that you should shut windows and doors. Baboons and monkeys, for instance, see a car coming along with an open window, and they know that inside the car is likely to be something that they want, food or something nice, so they'll try and get in the car window even if it's half open. And if you leave lots of doors open, of course, the baboons will basically move in and take over your car. Important things to learn. When you get to camp in South Africa, the rest camps camps, the places you might stay overnight, are all fenced off. They have a curfew. You have to arrive by usually 6 o'clock at night because the gates are shut. It's after they know that predators mostly hunt at night, so they kind of want to have human beings who don't know much about anymore avoiding being eaten inside the camp before dark. And so you get to the camp and you learn that even in the camp things are not that safe. Monkeys, for instance, also get into the camp, and monkeys steal things and eat things, and snakes hang around in camps. My father, I remember one night, got into bed and the puff adder was in bed with him. Puff adders come in out of the heat, they're cold-blooded, they go into a nice shady place. The bed looks like quite a nice place when you're hanging around. They get in under the bedclothes and stay there. And you get into bed and there's this fairly cold, lifeless feel that then moves. Luckily, puff adders have to chew you, really, because they've got backward-facing fangs. They have to chew you to get poison in, so you have a chance to get out before you get a big hit of major poison. So there are some things that you kind of learn. Whether or wild things take suitable precautions. That's a big kind of lesson you get from being in the game reserve. If you're in the area and you've got stuff, you're going to be a target. It's not that the monkeys or the baboons say, we're going to pick this car specifically because we're only looking for big silver cars with lots of nice things in it. They look for opportunities and they go for opportunities. If you try and transpose those lessons to the internet, it's slightly harder to do graphically. The internet you could think of as a huge global game reserve packed with wild things. The pictures of wild things on the internet are not nearly as interesting as the wild things you might find in the park. Traditional pictures of hackers and crooks and criminals who live on the internet are all fairly boring because people in hoods playing with computers don't on the face of it look like really interesting folk. People stealing passwords, stealing information and stealing data don't really look that interesting in terms of pictures. But the lessons really are pretty much the same because right the way around the world, and that's cybercrime, the top 20 countries for cybercrime, you see that America is the first, Britain is the fourth. Right the way around the world, cybercrime goes on across the whole of the internet. So you could have some simple rules for yourself, which is when you're on the internet, when you're in touch with cyber criminals, take suitable precautions. Think about how simple and straightforward it is. If you're connected to the internet and you've got money or assets or anything like that, you're going to be a target. Cyber criminals aren't looking for you, they're looking for vulnerabilities and options. And a big part of what we want to talk about today is how you can deal with making sure that those vulnerabilities and options for criminals to take the things that you value are closed down and managed in a way that enable your organization to concentrate on doing what you really want to do, which is sell products and services to your customers and go on doing successfully year on year, rather than having to divert cash and resources to dealing with the impact of cybercrime. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about the corporate governance of cybersecurity, and I think it's probably worthwhile just starting off with a couple of definitions of what governance and management are about, because governance in the world of technology is an often misused term. I've drawn on Wikipedia, which is that well-known source of solid, reliable definitions and facts. You can get a definition there of corporate governance as being the set of processes, customs, policies, laws, and institutions that affect the way people direct, administer, or control a corporation. In other words, it's a framework within which a corporation or organization would be managed. And management, therefore, is usefully defined as the act of getting people together to work on and accomplish a desired set of goals and objectives. Governance, in other words, is not the same thing as management. The logic of governance, whether you're looking at corporate governance or IT governance, is that management needs a clear framework within which to pursue identified business objectives in which performance and accountability is transparent and progress and success is easily identifiable. And it's worthwhile thinking about, from a governance point of view, what a governance model might look like in relation to technology. There is, for those of you who have not come across it, an international standard for the governance of IT, and it's called ISO IEC 38500, ISO 38500 for short. And what it says is that the role of the board in relation to technology is to direct IT management in terms of processes, activities, projects, and business as usual, to hear proposals and evaluate them for things that could be done better, and to monitor performance and conformance of the IT organization. In other words, the board's role is not to manage IT, that's what you have an IT management team for. The board's role is to make sure that IT is doing the things that the board wants done, that deliver business objectives, deliver business results, which ensure compliance with laws and regulations, and which above all, when you're thinking about cybersecurity, ensure that the organization is taking appropriate steps to deal with cyber risk. What happens in many organizations where the board hasn't made itself involved in the framework for cybersecurity is that the CIO, the CISO, the IT manager, whoever is in charge of security will tend to default to a security setting which is as little risk as possible. And as little risk as possible is a logical default, because if you're going to get it in the neck if it goes wrong, you want as little as possible to go wrong. That tends to mean that you're not that open-minded about the idea of exposing assets to the internet and to use, because what you don't have in a situation where the board hasn't given clear guidance is clarity about what the board's appetite for risk is. And at the heart of an IT governance framework and a cybersecurity governance framework is the idea that the board should identify clearly how much risk it's prepared to take and give that guidance to the IT management or security team. That enables the IT management team to say, okay, this amount of risk we can live with, we don't need to lock all of those things down quite as firmly. We might, for instance, allow some of our people to use instant messenger or Facebook, because there's a level of risk which management is happy to accept. We have clear guidance that they're happy to accept, and we can get on with it. So the starting point for looking at the governance of cybersecurity is recognizing that the board has a role in setting the guidelines and the framework for the management of security. And that's not the same as saying that the board has to understand all the detail of the risk and the technology. You don't. You simply have to understand how to set a framework for the experts to get stuck into. We talk about cybersecurity because in the United Kingdom, cybersecurity has become a major issue. 3-4 years ago, the subject used to be called information security, and nobody really paid much attention to it. Now it's basically called cybersecurity. It's not very different from information security, but we all worry about it a lot more. In 2010, the Comanches government published a national security strategy in which they identified cybersecurity as a level 1 risk. At 4 level 1 risks, and cybersecurity, or the risk of cyber attack, was the second on the list of national security concerns. And the reason they did that, of course, is the critical national infrastructure, commercial operations, hospitals, utilities, all of those aspects of how the economy works, plus, of course, central government, the military, they all depend to one extent or another on cyber services working effectively. So in 2011, the government produced a national cybersecurity strategy, a very specific document which says, this is what we're going to do in the UK, this is what our objectives are. The first objective was to make the UK one of the most secure places in the world to do cyber business. The second was to make the UK more resilient to cyber attack, which means being able to soak up, cope with and respond to cyber attack, better able to protect our interests. Thirdly, to help shape an open, vibrant and stable cyber space. And fourthly, to build cybersecurity knowledge, skills and capability. And this, of course, is a major area because there simply are not enough people in the UK or around the world who are able to help deal with cybersecurity. The UK estimates that there's a shortfall of somewhere between 3,000 and 6,000 people with the requisite cybersecurity management skills, the range of skills that are necessary to deal with that. So that's the National Cybersecurity Strategy. The National Audit Office quite sensibly said, well, that's a terrific strategy. How are you getting on, government? And did an audit. And the audit quite clearly identifies that we're failing. In February 2013, the National Audit Office, looking back, said that in 2011 there were 44 million cyber attacks in the United Kingdom. Remember, the National Audit Office is, broadly speaking, an independent organisation, even though it's government funded. The annual cost of cybercrime to the United Kingdom is between 18 and 27 billion pounds. Most interestingly, the conclusion was that 80% of those cyber attacks could have been prevented through basic security hygiene. 80% of between 18 and 27 billion pounds worth of losses could have been prevented through basic security hygiene. Now, they're not saying 80% could have been prevented by employing the most advanced, sophisticated cyber protection experts you can find in the world. It's basic security hygiene that would have got rid of 80% of the attacks. Pricewaterhouse does a biannual information security breaches survey in conjunction with the government business ministry, and the 2012 survey found that 93% of large corporations, 76% of small businesses in the UK suffered at least one cybersecurity breach in 2012. Cybersecurity breaches defined fairly broadly, not necessarily just an external hack. Could be an internal hack, could be a loss of data, could be a loss of a mobile device with data on it. It's a cybersecurity breach. The estimated cost for a large organization for a single breach, and this is primarily direct cost, not indirect cost, not reputation damage, not restitution, just direct identifiable cost, was between 110 and 250,000 pounds for a large business, and between 15 and 30,000 pounds for a smaller business. The cost of a single breach. So it's a kind of interesting, even if rhetorical question. What's a sensible amount of money to spend on preventing a breach if you're, let us say, a small business? Is it sensible to maybe spend between 15 and 30,000 pounds in a year to get yourself to the place where you're unlikely ever to have a major cybersecurity breach? Verizon investigated worldwide data breaches, and their report in 2012 is equally telling. 855 incidents identified worldwide, 174 million records that had been compromised, 98% of them involved in one way or another external agents. 58% of all data theft had been tied to activist groups, 81% of breaches involved hacking, 79% of the breaches were victims of opportunity. The windows were open so the baboons could get in. Victims of opportunity, 79% of the breaches. 96% of attacks were not highly difficult. 80% could have been prevented, according to NAO, by basic security hygiene. 96% of the attacks were not highly difficult. 85% of the breaches took weeks to discover, with 92% of them being discovered by third parties. Funds, be phoned up by a customer and told that your website has been hacked, and there is a jihadist message showing on the website. 92% of incidents discovered by third parties. McAfee, most recently, estimate the global cost of cybercrime as being $300 billion US. I mean, you might say they would say that, they have a lot of security products to sell, but they brought that down from a earlier much higher wild guess. 300 billion is their idea of the current cost of cybercrime. So, being the victim of a cyber attack can be costly, can be painful. For organizations with shareholders, it's interesting to discover that shareholders are aware of cybercrime as a business issue. A recent survey of shareholders of US investors found that 70% of them were interested in reviewing companies' records of cyber incidents, with an even bigger percentage saying we probably wouldn't invest in a company with a history of attacks. And we wouldn't invest in a company with a history of attacks, not just because they lose money, but because there's a reasonable prospect that their competitive advantage will be eroded. Their intellectual property, their customer lists, their details about meetings with key suppliers and customers, all of that might be leaked and find its way into the hands of a competitor, with the result that our investment might turn out not to be as worthwhile as it was. Respondents were twice as worried about a breach of customer data than they were about theft of intellectual property. And that, to an extent, reflects the extent to which, over the last couple of years, particularly in the US, breaches of customer data have led to very large shareholder suits against management for failure to protect data, with costs running somewhere around about $100 to $150 per compromised record. So if you have 50 million compromised records, that's a lot of money to write off against the bottom line. So, in the United Kingdom, the government's decided the chairman of the larger companies are going to solve the problem. And GCHQ and MI5 wrote to the chairs of the boards of the UK FTSE 350 and the chairs of the audit committees back in July and said, chaps, cybersecurity is a major issue, we're not winning, you have to take personal accountability and get involved in making sure that it's being dealt with properly inside your organisation. So it was obviously published, the individual letters went out to all of the heads, it was headline news in the Financial Times back in July, and the couple of things that MI5 and GCHQ were saying is that you, the chairman, have to personally sit down with the people who are responsible for security and go through a health check. It's no good palming it off on the CEO or the CIO and saying, come back and tell me if it's okay. You personally need to sit down and go through the stuff and make sure it's okay. And you should sit down with the audit partner of your external auditor and go through the same process, because not only will that give you an objective view of what's going on, but it will also enable you to access in a confidential way their information about what's happening across their other clients. The senior partner in one of the audit firms concerned said that this month audit partners initiating detailed discussion with chairmen and chairs of audit committees on the level of risks and the gaps and vulnerabilities that exist inside the organisation, and are saying, as you would expect, that they will be saying to their clients, you need to be making sure that all the way down your supply chain, key suppliers are taking appropriate steps to protect their selves against cyber risk, because if they're not, how can you be sure that you're protected? You all know what a phishing attack looks like, yes? So we'll touch on them a little bit later on. But it's now one of the better forms of phishing attack is where the attackers take over the network of one of your smaller suppliers. So that the email you get is coming from a known network. You know it's the correct network from the email box of somebody who you deal with. And it looks and smells exactly like what you expect it to be, except it's carrying a payload. So, driving cybersecurity, cyber risk management down the supply chain gets to look like quite a sensible thing, because your supply chain can pose a significant risk to you as an organization. PIS and CESG are currently involved in harassing all of the organizations of company secretaries and chartered accountants to get thoroughly involved in making sure that boards and non-executive directors understand that cyber risk is a key issue. It's no longer acceptable to say, actually I find IT pretty boring, cyber risk is pretty dull, there's much more interesting things to talk about. You actually are under a lot of pressure now from all sides, if you're on a large company board, to make sure that you're dealing with cybersecurity. You're recognizing that it's a significant business risk, and given that it's a corporate governance requirement, given that it's a statutory duty of directors to deal with significant risks, you're under pressure to deliver against that obligation. So I just want to talk a little bit about what the cyber risk looks like. The logical starting point is to look at what's called cyber war. Cyberspace is the fifth sphere of operation. So for many countries, the traditional spheres of operation are land, sea, and air. We've recently added, well, in the last 30 or 40 years, the idea of space as a sphere of warfare, and certainly initiated by the Chinese, the idea of cyberspace as the fifth sphere of military operations. Talk a bit about that in a minute. Commercial competitors exercise themselves around cybersecurity all the time. Terrorists, organized crime, individual criminals, activists are all different types of folk who are going to get involved in trying to break into or break down your defenses. Let me talk a bit about cyber war first. Cyber war is an issue because the government and military forces depend on electronic systems to be able to operate. Part of the sophistication is that you've got iPads out in the front line with soldiers, you've got electronic command and control positions, and so from an attack point of view, if you can disrupt and deny those services, you've got a reasonably good prospect of a successful attack. And there have been a series of exactly those. In Estonia, in Georgia, cyber attack has led or been part of an official or unofficial attack by one country on another. In the South Ossetia, cyber war was what opened up the opportunities for the Russian armor to move in. Critical national infrastructure is dependent on computers, on SCADA systems, and we've got what's called an advanced persistent threat. Advanced persistent threats are significant. They're originally, it is believed, originated in China. China is still the only state that has a specific cyber war doctrine. China has been involved in developing cyberspace and cyber war doctrine for some time. There's a long history of what it calls warfare without limits. If we set out to win, we set out to win. We don't have any rules about what we do and we don't do. Winning is what it's all about. And if you go and look up any of these activities, GhostNet, Night Dragon, Shady Rat, they've all been extended periods of attack on Western or industrial nation infrastructure and assets going on over an extended period of time. The 21st Century Chinese Cyber Warfare book is worthwhile reading. I believe the ITGB bookshop probably has copies. It's really fun to read on the plane. And of course, all industrial organizations industrial companies are targets because they all have valuable assets as well as having armed forces. An advanced persistent threat is exactly what it's described as. It's advanced, so it's developed usually by hackers and cyber criminals who have state-level support. It's sophisticated. It's designed to evade most defenses. It's usually combines a range of different technologies. So it might be multi-channel. It might be an attack that involves a combination of email, direct hacking, social engineering, all put together in a way designed to achieve a particular result. An APT is persistent. It goes on over time. They go on trying to break in consistently until they find a way in. And once they're in, what an advanced persistent threat attack is about is planting some form of malware on your system to collect data or to be in a position to take down systems at a later point or to use your systems as part of a much larger robot network. It's a threat because that's what it's doing. It's stealing information, compromising systems, generally doing whatever the attacker wants to make happen. Some of you may have seen the furore which came up about 3 or 4 months ago when a US organization published its research. Mandiant Group published its research going back over some 7 or 8 years, where they identified the source of most attacks on most US Western companies coming from a specific building in downtown Shanghai, which specifically was associated with the People's Liberation Army of China. China denied it, of course, and said it's really American propaganda. So, cyber war, first area to worry about, but it's not such a big issue for most organizations because you say to yourself, well, if cyber war happens, it's kind of warfare. We're going to be in trouble if it does. Do we need to worry about it? You probably do, because the waves of attack can impact how your organization operates. Bigger issue, almost certainly, is cyber crime. Cybercrime losses have doubled in the last 2 years, says this PwC data breaches survey. More particularly, organized crime. Organized crime is a sophisticated operation. Europol says that serious organized crime groups are, generally speaking, multi-commodity and polycriminal. They sell a whole bunch of stuff: drugs, people, guns. They have a whole bunch of different routes for selling them. They have a whole series of different criminal types of activities, from fraud through to blackmail and so on. And they have a diverse portfolio of business interests. That undoubtedly includes online crime. Online crime is one of the activities available to all criminal groups because it's a relatively straightforward method of collecting money, and it can be exercised from a long way away from your target. You can attack companies in the United Kingdom, from the South China Sea, from Russia, from anywhere in the world where the jurisdiction is going to protect the criminal rather than even vaguely giving the crime fighters a chance to attack. So cybercrime it's certainly lower level than an advanced persistent threat. An advanced persistent threat is an attack usually focused on a specific organization or a specific industry. Cybercrime is focused on opportunities rather than on industries or on specific organizations. Usually cybercrime starts off as an automated search for vulnerabilities. It doesn't start off with a criminal sitting in a room trying to work out which targets to attack. It starts off with a criminal saying, I'm looking for these types of vulnerabilities, and sending out a search across the internet using complicated tools like Google to find targets that can be attacked. So all you have to do is have the vulnerability to be a target for attack. You don't have to be an organization which has got £1 million or £100 million of cash sitting in the bank. You just have to have a vulnerability. They're sophisticated, they're multi-vector. Sophisticated criminals will attack from a number of different directions. They mostly understand what they're doing. Once they've found a vulnerability, will work out how to exploit it. They're professional. You can get, with some hacking software, you can get support packages. You get a support package which says, bronze, silver, and gold level support package. If it doesn't work, we'll give you 24/7 support, give you a money-back guarantee. All criminal, not backed by any contracts, because there's not much point really if you're a criminal, but it exists. And of course, it's extraterritorial, extrajudicial. I'm going to touch on a couple of these slightly more detailed versions of how cybercrime is executed shortly. Criminals are looking at your assets. The vast majority of successful cyber attacks involve stealing 10, 20, 30,000 pounds from organizations. If you trawl the reports of successful attacks, you'll find every day 5 to 15 new reports turning up on Google of some company somewhere which has just discovered it lost 5,000 pounds or 10,000 pounds or a customer list or something over the course of the last 2 or 3 months. Brewing the fact that that's now happened, and now they have to spend money on putting cybersecurity defenses in place as well. So attackers are after intellectual property, customer lists, details of confidential negotiations, because those can be sold to the other side. They're looking for anything that might have a value. Banking information, payment card details, personal information, it all has a value. It's interesting that given that personal information has a value, personal information makes identity theft possible. How much personal information most people make available about themselves on Facebook and LinkedIn. They're all useful places to go if you're trying to create a profile that enables you to pose as somebody. You can get most of the key information you want from those social networking sites. The main loser, says the UK's Office of Cybersecurity Information Security, is UK business, which suffers from high levels of IP theft and industrial espionage. Cyberspace is perhaps characterized by the absence of cyber police. Most British streets, you'd still hope somewhere after a bit of time you'd find a policeman, you'd find a method of reporting a crime they might be able to do or might be interested in doing something about it. In cyberspace, not so much. Finding a police force that's going to be interested in the cybercrime, which they're not going to be able to prosecute, which if they collect the data will just bring their successful prosecution statistics down, not so interested in. So how do you report a cybercrime? Who do you take it to? Or do you just suffer in silence? Because at the moment you admit to having been breached. You have a whole bunch of potential customers going, well, maybe we won't deal with you after all. You've had a breach, you've lost all of that data, you have a number of other potential actions being brought against you because you've failed to protect perhaps personal data, and the Information Commissioner gets a little bit shirty with you about that. In cyberspace, to mangle an alien comment from the film Alien, no one can hear you scream. Hackers can get formal qualifications. Most organizations will employ people who have in their cybersecurity teams who are formally qualified to hack. And there's 3 or 4 different formal qualifications for hackers. People are taught how to break into websites, networks, and they're taught how to do that so that you can block the attacker. And the key bit, we hope, is that the people we've taught how to break in will be ethical, and they won't, in their spare time, go, gosh, I'm having so much fun, let me go and see if I can break into this well-protected site, wherever it is. So we hope that ethical hackers are genuinely ethical, but the reality is, if you want to be a criminal hacker, you can go and get formal training. You can get the tools and exploit codes you want easily off the internet. You don't have to be a programmer anymore to create your own exploit tools. You just download it. It's available for free, with support, with backup. You don't have to be very smart, you just have to be a bit of a criminal. The top vulnerabilities are published. You don't have to work them out, you don't have to create your own list. They're published on the SANS websites, on the on the OWASP site, on the CWE's websites. You put those letters into your browser, you'll find lists of the most common software vulnerabilities by operating system, by application, by browser. They're all listed there. So if you're a hacker, you don't have to think about what shall I attack. You just go and have a look and see what's currently the most common vulnerability that works across the most number of organizations, and then you go and find some exploits that will attack it. It doesn't require a great deal of technology or programming capability to do that. It just requires the ability to think logically and sensibly. So here's a real-life example of a client organization, a conversation, I've only got a part of it, which went on through their live chat one morning. Person comes on and says, hello, I'm a hacker. I've stopped your website because another company's paid me to take your site down. It was true. The first thing this person did was look at the website. It was down. The hacker said, hello, do check or transfer me to your manager. And the live chat operator went, well, I think I'll get my manager involved. This is already a bit hairy. So the manager came on and said, which competing company is it that's asked you to take the website down? And the hacker says, well, you deal with me, you give me some money, and I'll open your site, and then I'll tell you who it is. And then some further conversation, which ended up with the manager of the company saying, are you proud of the work you're doing, Khalil? Khalil says, no, but I'm still doing it. And this particular company didn't pay the required danger money. They managed to get help to get their site back up and improve the security and lock the attacker up. But that is a live conversation going on with a not very large organization with an attacker going into their website. Whether they were doing it on behalf of a competitor or simply on behalf of themselves, that's not clear because there's no forensic investigation which goes and digs into how it happened. But it happened. Their website went down and they had to go through some very major pain to get the website back up. Fraud as a service. We all know about software as a service. Fraud as a service, FAAS, now available on the internet to smart operators who really don't want to get involved in any of the complicated stuff about creating their own stuff. Citadel, some of you may have come across, supported by a team in Russia, created a set of tools. Citadel, okay, this is hacking software. Citadel has seen 4 major upgrades, including version 1.3.4.5, that addressed customer concerns. Hacking software that addresses customer concerns. An excellent example of fraud as a service model, first ever crimeware to have its own dedicated CRM. Cyber criminals are not kiddies playing, they're a sophisticated undergrowth of the internet, running very successful businesses, breaking into and stealing your assets. Tor. Has anybody come across the Tor browser? The Tor browser you can download by going to the torproject.org. The Tor browser was created by the US National NSA in order to give people in countries with repressive regimes a method of browsing the internet without being traced by their governments. It's a really smart piece of technology. Anybody can download it. It works. You can't be traced. You can browse the internet and nobody can trace you. Remarkably, criminals use it. That's the website. It's available online, download it, not a problem, works perfectly. Big leap in the number of computers connecting to the Tor anonymous browsing system in August. It doubled in August. And the managers of the Tor website believe that, and the cybersecurity the national cybersecurity groups believe that it's primarily cyber thieves who've got, actually now we're getting a bit of publicity, or Tor's getting a bit of publicity, we've heard about it, we'll use it. So Tor, you can be not found, you can go and buy stuff. Tor will get you to the Silk Road website. The Silk Road website is a place you can buy anything you want. It's quite a dangerous place to be. You don't necessarily want to be there if you don't know what you're doing. You can buy heroin, that's blocks of heroin. You can buy guns, you can buy people. You can buy lists of payment card data. You can buy PIN numbers. You can buy pretty well anything. It's a darknet e-commerce site. The coin of choice is the Bitcoin. Right? Bitcoins are a form of currency that don't belong to any country in the world. They're a computer-generated currency. They can be traded. They have value. And it's the coin of currency on darknet. So you decide that actually you want to be a cyber criminal. It's pretty straightforward. You go and get some fraud as a service software. You steal a bunch of stuff. You go onto Silk Road. You flog it. You get a bunch of Bitcoin. It's not difficult to be a cyber criminal, is it? You just have to be reasonably smart and reasonably criminal. The Hackers homepage, another jolly interesting site to go and visit. It's the Hackers homepage because their motto in their 16th year is, they make it, we break it. That's what they do, they break stuff. And they enable you to get hold of all sorts of useful devices, how to cheat blackjack, cheat baccarat, online poker cheating, hack RFID cards. Pretty straightforward. If you're thinking about being a cyber criminal, you don't even have to say, I know about RFIDs, that's what I'm going to be a criminal in. You can just go onto a website like that and go, I wonder what I can do with this. Cool, that's easy. You don't even have to go onto the darknet to find hackershomepage.com. You can find that through Google. Find a blog which tells you how to hack credit cards. So you're a newbie, what do I do? How do I go about doing this? Well, here you are, simple guidance. And this is not old, I downloaded this last night. How to hack credit cards. A couple of ways you can do it. Just for fun or to use the cards, sometimes because you want to use them, and it talks you through the basic steps. How do you hack cards? So they're not saying, note, go and find companies who obviously have lots of customers and therefore have stuff worth hacking. What they're saying is, go to Google and type VP-ASP shopping cart 5.0, because that will give you all of the shopping carts that have this known vulnerability. Now you hack them. So I talk often to CEOs, CIOs, CTOs, say that we're not likely to be a target. Why would they come after us with just an ordinary business? And the answer is they're not coming after you, they're going after vulnerabilities. And if you happen to have a vulnerability which they're going after, you're going to be hacked. They don't look at you and go, okay, you're a charity, you're a this, you're a that, maybe we'll let you off, but you're going to be hacked. That's kind of a racing certainty. That's how you do this. Here's the code to put in. You don't have to be any good at it, you just put it in and you get to hack the website. So, the stakes for organizations are high. Potential loss from fraud, customer information, intellectual property compromise, fines from legal and regulatory bodies, loss of reputation, all of those kind of things at a high level are the types of impacts that you might get and suffer from if you're the victim of a successful cyber attack. There's also what I call cyber snakes. You've got a whole bunch of people mobile with mobile devices. Your secure perimeter is now wherever somebody happens to be working. They've got a mobile phone or a USB stick or something with data on it that enables people to access the network. They can access information from the cloud wirelessly. It's all dead easy for people to do. And the criminals exploit that, and they also exploit the gullibility of people. So a phishing attack, everybody knows what phishing attacks look like because they're badly written, they're obviously not relevant. This is a phishing attack that doesn't exactly look badly written, it's well put together, everything kind of hangs together, and the only thing that gives it away is it's got something to click on. Everything else you could read, most of your staff would read and go, okay, that's obviously for us, better click on it and deal with it. And you click on it and deal with it, and it downloads a neat little piece of malware which will collect perhaps keystrokes or collect information about financial affairs. Spear phishing. This is a genuine example of a spear phishing email where an attacker over several days put together an email which was designed to look precisely and exactly as though it was genuine. Collected information from Facebook, collected information from the web page of the user, crafted an email which went to the person at his Gmail account and looked as though it was coming from a colleague at work. Very simple, but obvious kind of thing. Just informed we need new material for the blog. Jeff sent me this report regarding new phishing threats that are appearing all over the place. Can you take a look at it and see if we can use it? Most people go, yeah, okay, I'll take a look at it. I know who you are. Click, let's have a look at the report. Thank you very much. Download a nice piece of malware. Most organizations expect that their staff are going to work out that this is an attack on their own. Most organizations don't think they need to teach staff what a spear phishing attack looks like. It's designed to catch one person. A spear phishing attack is not designed to catch anybody amongst 25 million. It's designed to catch one person. It's crafted to catch one person. Most organizations think that their staff will work out for themselves that this is not something they should be paying attention to. Will they? So, farming websites. Phishing is what comes to you. Farming is when you go onto the website. That looks like a pretty genuine website. citizensedmond.com kind of looks like the URL. Looks like the website. What gives it away, of course, is the type of information that you need to put in order to access your account. So you can make a farming website work either by infecting the computer of the person who's doing the browsing, or by infecting the computer on which the website sits, so that you redirect the visitor to your farming or malware website, which is designed to get people to input sensitive data so that you can attack them. Do your staff know what a farming website might look like? Do your staff know, have they worked it out for themselves, how to spot a farming website and what to do about it before they give away critical corporate information, like the information that goes with their corporate bank card? So governance of cyber resilience. The board's role should be, given the cyber risk environment, to make sure that security management, business and IT activities and processes is doing what needs to be done to deal with the identified range of risks and challenges that the organization has. The starting point, if you're going to address security, is to create a security baseline. You've got to start off by saying, let's deal with the obvious things before we spend too much time working out where the rest of our risk is. And the obvious things are to make sure that mobile devices are encrypted. Make sure laptops, mobiles, iPads are encrypted, so that if they get lost, it's not easy for people to break in and get data. It means it's not easy for people to access the list of customer information or other personal information you might have on the device. Make sure networks and websites are tested for vulnerabilities and the vulnerabilities are patched. Basic housekeeping, create a security baseline, start training your staff, and then it's worthwhile starting on a cybersecurity risk assessment. The cybersecurity risk assessment would be trying to work out exactly what the types of issues are that you as a board want to have dealt with, and on the basis of what appetite for risk. Greatest threat to data and computer systems comes from their own employees, was one of the findings in a report that we did. 20% of respondents said they didn't even know if their organization had ever been subject to a cyber attack, which I hope means that it never had. Boards receive regular reports, apparently, but 52% of our respondents said reports on IT security are received at best annually. Remember, it's not just 52% of companies that are subject to cyber attack, it's 100% of people connected to the internet that are subject to attack. 30% of respondents said understanding of current IT security requests, IT security issues should be a prerequisite for board membership. Maybe it should be higher. Maybe being on the board, you should actually have a better awareness of the type of risks and the things that as an organization you should do first. How much should you invest in making sure that you are appropriately secure? And how long should you wait before making the decision? Do you want to wait until after you've been hacked so you can work out whether you really do have vulnerabilities or not, and if you are, exactly how much people are going to get away? Or do you want to make some assumptions in advance and make some decisions about what's a sensible amount to invest in dealing with the range of evident, self-evident risks that exist? There is a growing demand from customers, from suppliers, from government, from certainly increasingly we'll find from FTSE 350 companies, to be able to demonstrate that there is an appropriate level of cyber security in place. 50% of organizations said their company's been asked about information security by its customers in the past 12 months. These are not the kind of statistics that as organizations we should be ignoring. How much should we spend on cyber security? I would say you should probably spend marginally less than what the cost of the worst breach in a single year might be to the organization, taking into account all of the aspects. But given that the average company spends about 6% of its IT budget on IT security, the broad consensus in the industry is that we need to plug the laptop in. The broad consensus in the industry is that you should be spending about 13% of your total IT budget on IT security. A survey carried out by a combination of the US Secret Service and a number of other bodies, including the Australian Secret Service, identified that where organizations had made significant increases in their investment in cybersecurity, they saw a significant decrease in the number of successful attacks. I guess that's not a desperately surprising outcome, but it nevertheless is a documented and quantified outcome. A significant increase in what you do about defending yourself leads to a significant improvement in the security of the organization, reduction in cyber attacks. And it's worthwhile bearing in mind that that survey, the US Security Service survey, is carried out with willing respondents, people who actually want to share their information. So there are people who think they're doing the right things about security. The reality for organizations outside of that is almost certainly somewhat worse, because they're not doing enough, they're not conscious enough about what they're doing or about how they're doing.
Okay, hi. I'm not really an IT expert. I'm a journalist, and I'm an investigative journalist. I've worked for BBC2, I've worked for the Sunday Times Insight team. I've always been involved in technology, and about 10 years ago we started doing this exercise where we were looking into the amount of information that actually gets discarded on any piece of equipment, which then became something that we started to do as part of the Cybersecurity Research Institute, which was an organisation that I essentially put together because there was a complete lack of any attention in the area from the government, which seems to have actually been redressed now. Anyway, lost data. Well, you know, where do people lose data? One of the most interesting things about information is that for thousands of years we've worked on the basis that information is power and that knowledge confers insight. And yet for some reason in the last 17 years we've embraced this disruptive idea to such an extent that what we think is a really good idea is to spread data to the winds, literally. And how are we doing this? Well, you see, laptops and PCs. In 2002, number of PCs in the world reached 1 billion. 2007, Gartner says 2 billion marks being reached. 2008, 1 billion. I mean, it's all sort of fairly self-explanation. That we're basically generating data in amounts that we have never ever seen before. One of the things that happens with all of this data is that we just chuck it away by and large. A lot of organisations don't seem to have much of a policy on information and about how they will actually track an data audit. Now, what sort of data is discarded? So since 2010, we've done things like buy hard drives off eBay, we've bought mobile phones, a lot of other devices. The hard drives are really quite staggering. The first hard drive that I got was in 2010. I went to, we bought 6. I went to a boot fair and bought 2. Those 2 belonged to Deutsche Bank, and they belonged to a subsidiary of Deutsche Bank called Morgan Grenfell. I'm a journalist. I couldn't believe it. Paul McCartney's bank account details were on the disc. It was manna from heaven as far as we were concerned. It went straight onto the front page of the Daily Express, and it went on to Channel 4 News that night. That was great fun. Databases. The last time that we did this was unbelievable. We came across a hard drive that belonged to a company called News International. That was exactly the time that News International were doing phone hacking. On that hard drive, I had the entire contacts details of the Sun newspaper. I could have phone hacked every single journalist on the Sun if I wanted to, which is probably not a good idea because they would come after me. But email. On one of the drives that, on a mobile phone that we got, which was a BlackBerry, and we all know that BlackBerries are these very, very nice devices that we can all encrypt. On that we had email that was from an Australian celebrity, and on that there was details of his emails, the fact that he was having an affair, the fact that the text messages from BlackBerry were also demonstrating that he was cancelling appointments with his wife so that he could actually have tryst with his mistress, which is obviously great blackmail potential. Pictures. And we got a great hard drive from the last time that we did this, and this was a sample of only, I think, 113. These were hard drives that we bought off eBay. The hard drive belonged to the personal assistant to the head of NATO, and from that hard drive we could extract enough information to blackmail this man absolutely comprehensively in 3 different ways. There was details of his religion and there were details of his wife's social security number, there were details of their share transactions, there was every single piece of information on there. It was really comprehensive, and we could actually get an absolute snapshot of this person's life, because we could find out that his wife wanted to start a family, because there were emails between her and friends about wanting to do that. There were searches on the internet about starting up a nursery. There were even searches on the internet about wanting to find out how she could make herself more sexually attractive to her husband. What she didn't know, because she didn't have the luxury of being able to look at the hard drive in the way that we were that there were 80,000 pictures of young homosexual activity on the drive, and he obviously wasn't that interested in it. This, to be perfectly honest, made him very, very, very blackmailing. As you can see, the internet search details, all of that, we pull this information off all of the time. How incredible the information is. 2 years ago we got the launch codes and all of the blueprints of the Terminal High Altitude Area Defence System from Lockheed Martin. Lockheed Martin said that this was not sensitive information, but we checked it out with a lot of people and they told us that it was extremely sensitive information. We got the entire launch details of a Ford model, which was worth about £1 billion. That was on a hard drive, which was thrown out by Ford. And I could go on. I mean, the amount of information that we can actually get hold of is absolutely staggering. And the places that it comes from, we get it from government, we get it from hospitals, so on, so on, so on. The thing that we didn't actually print, and just to show that everybody does this, is we got a hard drive from the American Mafia. I won't tell you what was on it, but we gave it to the FBI very, very quickly, and we did not print rather than we got it. Now, so what does all of this mean? One of the most amazing things about all of these hard drives that we get is the absolute quality of the information. On one hard drive that we got from Scottish and Newcastle had its entire corporate records on it. It had the password of the head of finance, and it had the password of the deputy head of finance. It had literally all of their records on it. Now, why rob banks? Because that's where the money is. We've seen in the last week or so 2 attacks on banks and 2 quite celebrated attacks on banks, but they're not the first. There's been lots more like that. I think there was an attack on a Japanese bank about in 2005, which is very, very similar to what's going on at the moment. I mean, this is why people are doing it. People want this information because it's where the money is. Now, in the information age, your digital identity is obviously going to be the key to getting into all of this sort of information. This is your cash point PIN number, will give you free money from the whole of the world. So your digital identity will give you the ability to create accounts, move cash around, steal string of digits. So, I mean, this is the question everybody's asking is, are criminals doing this? Because, you know, I'm a journalist and it isn't that I'm lucky enough to keep falling on this information. Yes, they are. Russian organised criminals are actively fuzzy matching data to produce information for sale. I've gone onto servers, I've seen people actually, you know, pushing together information, using it places to store it. Now, is this information from these lost disks sold? Yes, it is. Now, in Africa, you can go to Kenya, and you can go to Nigeria, you can go to other places where they are actually destroying these hard drives, but they actually look on them first of all to see if data's on them, and if there is, then the price of the hard drive goes up by 50%. And yeah, I absolutely know that for a fact. I've been in contact with people who are prepared to sell me that sort of information. But in 2004, Future Intelligence, which is the news organisation that I work for, we're told that call centre staff in India were being bribed to provide personal details of UK nationals. All of that information is being fuzzy matched over onto other systems because that's where it gets the value. I've been onto Russian organised crime sites that will sell you strings of bank account details with the mother's maiden name and the PIN, and all of that information collated. The only way that you can actually do that is by dragging together a lot of information from different sources, and definitely these discarded data items are very much in demand. And as you can see, it goes on and on. So what are the consequences? I mean, it's all pretty simple stuff. As I've said, blackmail, identity theft, fraud, misrepresentation, malicious manipulation of data, and then all of you people who are theoretically interested in preventing this, you know that there are going to be some serious penalties for all of this. The Financial Services Authority is waking up to it. The Information Commissioner has initially started picking on the public sector, mainly because he wants to make an example before he starts to hit the private sector. And the private sector is coming now. You know about the credit card company penalties for non-compliance, the PCI. What's interesting about that is that in the last year or so, definitely in the last 6 months, some of the surveys are beginning to indicate that consumers are becoming much, much more aware about the value of their data on devices. Now, in the event of that data getting lost or somebody not looking after it properly, then they're going to start coming after the people who've lost that data. The litigation is definitely no longer an iceberg, it's here. And again, I mean, I know that just because of the amount of lawyers who keep on sending me email asking me to write about them so that I can actually push out the message. So, is this going to get any better? I mean, middle of 2030, most people will be using smartphones. We're 2030, we've already seen that. 1.8 billion smartphones will be in use worldwide. I mean, we're seeing the smartphone manufacturers falling over themselves at the moment to produce more and more and more devices. But one of the interesting things about this is that means that we're chucking away a load of devices which are ever more powerful. They've got huge amounts of information on them. They've increasingly got that sort of information that I've been extracting off hard drives. The life expectancy of a mobile phone now is that of a butterfly. That's the rate at which we change it. It's once every 12 months. They're, highly consumer devices. And that quote's a great example of data proliferation, because I made it up to get the message across, and it got picked up by radio stations. I heard that bouncing around just about every radio station that day. Data is everywhere now. And is any of that information being any better looked after? No, it's not, because most of the people who've got all of this sensitive personal information, much of which is used as the basis of passwords, or even places where passwords are, is on those mobile phones. My children the other day were looking for a password, and I realised that they were just getting it off the mobile phone. Mobile phones are used for everything. Now, I personally think that the only way that this is going to be sorted out is by introducing biometrics, by putting encryption on things, and it's by businesses really taking seriously this amount of data that is sloshing around. We calculated that there is, just using the hard drives research that we've done, we calculated that there is enough data that you can extract from discarded devices to go to the moon and back. i.e., if you put that out as A4 pages, that's the amount of data that is sloshing about. And I'm happy to provide those for anybody so that they can be checked. And the reason for this slide is of the crashed car is the privacy advocates are saying that we're currently in a situation at the moment where the car industry was in the 1930s, where basic controls and constraints on it are not in place, and that the only way to actually achieve the levels of safety that we now expect from cars, if we wanted to have that level of safety and protection for personal data and for data generally, will be to go for encryption. And the actual quote that I had is from a guy called Simon Davis. At so many levels there comes a point when the computer industry is facing what the vehicle industry has faced in the 1930s, 1940s and 1950s, where health and safety became an issue for the entire industry, not just something that is judged by the occasional incident. That's where we're up to now. What that means is that although it's a pain for users, there has to be some level of default encryption and some level of default mid-level security, so that exposure of information simply cannot happen. Why is that important? Well, it's important because Simon Davis is no longer at Privacy International, and he's the advisor to the EU, which is pushing through the privacy regulation. Now, who needs to sort of get concerned about data and privacy? Well, literally everybody does it. The big issue that we have had until these first surveys have started to surface in the last few months is that hitherto people have always been more concerned with the tin than the contents. They've always been more concerned with the device and the latest iPhone, the latest computer. It's that they want. All of the old stuff gets stuck in the garage and then it gets thrown away. That's where, one of the computers that we got was from Scandia, the insurance company, and that computer had been given to a charity, and it found its way from the charity to a junk shop, and then from the junk shop to us. The computers from hospitals. I've been around rubbish tips and seen computers with asset tags on them that are discernibly from hospitals. It's one of the things that it's not just me doing it. I go around looking at all of the asset tags. You can see which organisations they're from often. People haven't even gone to the trouble of actually removing the asset tags. It's a big help for you, isn't it? You don't even have to fire it up. And so, as I say, everybody needs to start getting worried about this huge amount of data. It's not just the data on the machines. This, I think, is the real core message which everybody is missing, which is Information is the asset, and information is the thing that actually has value. But nobody actually thinks about what the value of the information is. Nobody goes through and thinks, what does a particular piece of information mean? Journalists are very good at this. We're very good at it because one of the things about data is data changes value over time. You know, you look at Jimmy Savile, the allegations about Jimmy Savile. Well, nobody was interested in the Jimmy Savile allegations when they couldn't get them through. Suddenly, they start being broadcast, and everybody realises there's some currency in them. Suddenly, all of those stories that weren't actually making it into the newspapers suddenly did make it into the newspapers. A piece of information actually changes. It's not a static object. And there's a real problem that people have with thinking that information is. It's not just the passwords. It's not just the usernames. Take, for example, the scandal that happened in Australia where the Chinese decided that they wanted to hack into, or wanted to gain as much information as they possibly could about the Australian metal markets. Well, the people who then became of great interest to them were the lawyers, because they realised that the lawyers weren't adequately protecting their systems and that they didn't know very much about data security. So they went in to attack the lawyers, because then they could extract all of the information about prices, etc., everything that was in the contracts, and they could then work out how to undercut them. It's literally beginning to think about what the value of a piece of information has, what you need to do about it. You know, what is a valuable piece of information to you? Is it the piece of information that you spent most acquiring? Is it the piece of information that will do the most damage to you? Is it the piece of information that you use the most? You know, this is not something that people have actually thought about. I've really sort of answered my last point, and but I mean, just to sort of underline that, I actually feel that people should go and they actually have to examine their businesses. They have to actually say, what do I do? What does the information mean to me? And have I got a policy of knowing where each piece of information has gone to, how many times it's been copied, and do I have a policy on its destruction at the end of it? Because, you know, if you don't, this will come back and bite you. And I mean, the list of companies that we've managed to embarrass is the only word, is long. And they are multinationals and right the way across the board, and the detail is incredible. I mean, just as a final thought, we got a hard drive from a North American defence company which had, it must have been an email server, but I don't think the people on the board knew that one of them was a transvestite and the other had a sexual sort of predilection, which was interesting to say the least. You know, this is the sort of information that people trust on these sort of devices, and it gets thrown away. I'm not just talking, I mean, I'm saying that there is information that is discarded that is also discarded along with company information, very valuable information, and you can put the two together and achieve some very, very meaningful results if you want. I'm finished. Just haranguing me.
Is it cyber security, information security, or IT security? I've seen it all three. When I started, it was IT security, then became information security, and from a personal point of view, I would argue that cyber security is a subset of information security. There could be a few people with pursed lips there, but we shall see. Right, my background. Quite rare these days. I spent 25 years in one organisation that seems to hit the headlines every day of the week at the moment. Originally in Barclaycard, but then in Barclays overall. The brief I got when I became their information security manager was form a security area with teeth, Steve. That was the lady IT director. and that was a tall order. I then became the first head of security architecture in 2003, late 2003-04, and then due to Barclays becoming more joined up rather than, if you like, conglomerate with numerous different businesses, I became very much involved in the security architecture, engineering and standards roles for Barclays worldwide, and that even includes the dreaded beast of the investment bank, Barclays Capital. Throughout this time, and it comes from my Barclaycard background, I also have been involved in the industry on chip and pin, or chip, that then became chip and pin. And I've got quite a few stories to tell about that. I'm actually proud of chip and pin because, believe me, you wouldn't believe how much fraud losses in the UK would be if we hadn't got it. And we must have done something right because the Americans are coming that way. However, are you really going to listen to me? Because before that, I was in engineering in various defence industry roles, making bombs and rockets and things of that nature. And I'm also proud to say I'm a genuine Arthur Daly, that I am an ex-second-hand car salesman. And now, well, you can see what about 12, 13 years did in information security. I'm a lot grayer. I have this part-time advisory role with Cryptomatic. Very talented company. About half their people have got PhDs. Most of them are in Denmark. And they apparently wanted me for common sense and what does the real world do. So why am I here? Well, I couldn't do much else a month and a half ago, so I was approached to do this talk, and I said yes, because genuinely I care as a consumer and professionally. It's very interesting that the stat that Alan gave, about 13% of the IT budget. Well, I remember I did something similar in 2001, and in banking it was suggested then that 89% of your IT budget should be on information security, because it hadn't been rebranded to cyber security, although yes, there are technical characteristics. In the UK, people were spending 1 or 2% of their IT budgets if they were lucky. Again, I felt it necessary that we needed about 20 odd people in information security in Barclaycard at the turn of the millennium. Based on the number we had, was that sensible? Absolutely not, because even if I got them, would I be able to use them effectively? Again, I have this big systems project management background, so I'd be wasting an awful lot of money. I don't know what the cross-section of businesses here is in terms of size, but I've seen over the years an awful lot of money wasted on security initiatives for a variety of reasons, which we'll come to. So, I want to talk about the context of the last 15 years. Hopefully the business drivers, and everything's got to be available everywhere, anytime, any delivery channel. Speed to market, in terms of competitiveness, organisational and commercial influences. If many of you are in fairly large organisations and you've been there over a decade, I would probably take a safe bet that you've probably seen 2 or at least 3 corporate restructures in that time. The life cycle implications of business and IT systems, I think, is a major factor on cyber/information security. And yes, I am going to say you need a disciplined, managed and sustained approach to it, because without that, where's your data? And then a few odds and ends for you to ponder and assess. So, that was the 1st of September. There's one that's left out of this slide, but same day, banks to be given cyber stress tests. Well, frankly, we always expect, well, we know we run under attack absolutely constantly and expect it. I do belong to the BCS, and it's quite a good organisation. Interesting, the latest edition that landed on my doormat about a couple of weeks ago, a third of the magazine is now security in one shape or form. That was never the case a year ago. There was the foiled attempt on the Santander branch. So the one that's missing, because I sent the slides to Michael last Thursday, is Barclays. and the 1.2 million that hit it. Were many of you surprised by the attack on the branches of a couple of the banks? Why not, if I may ask? Why were you not surprised? Is it? That's not what they were after, though, was it? Directly, for the physical money. In actual fact, on chip and pin, we had something similar about 5 years ago. And I want to give you, hopefully, an influence on the time ranges you have to think about these things. The pin pads, about 4 or 5 years ago, there were many compromised pin pads in the UK, potentially 1,000 or so. I looked on one of the websites a couple of nights ago, and there are still some variations on the theme of that attack, where pin pads were being split asunder, two compromised, slapped back together again with GPRS transmitter, etc., to harvest the data, card data, and the pin data. Where you do it, you can get away with it. Now, is that because the pin pads, the pin entry devices, pin pads were rubbish? I don't know. Because about 2001, 2002, as a UK industry, we decided, well, I and 2 or 3 others decided, that we ought to have some form of kite mark that all of us think that the pin pad is a reasonable device to put some sensitive authentication details into. So we actually went for a security protection profile. Common criteria, any of you familiar with that as a mechanism? And we went for EAL4. The scale goes from 0 to 7, with 7 being you can't do anything with it and it's frightfully expensive because it's ultra secure, and 0 being it's wide open pretty much. 4 was quite prudent, we thought. So 2001, 2002. Could we have foreseen that people were going to actually start splitting them apart in about 2007 and 8? I don't think so. We were far more concerned throughout the banking industry in you or I going to an ATM and somebody hitting us over the head with a baseball bat and running off with your car, having extorted out of you the value of your PIN. That never happened, so that particular one went away. The last quote on there, I'll just add one other stat on the entry device. If you went from EAL4 to 5 on the protection profile, i.e. make it more difficult, and the Germans are thinking of doing precisely that under SEPA, the European payment, whatever it is, I think, would add about £50 to the price of a pin entry device. There were about 1.2 million pin entry devices in the UK about a year or so ago. That's quite a large bill, and they're only meant to last about 7 years. Interesting comment, that one. Education, flexibility and security is a shared responsibility. Who said that? Well, it was in SC magazine this month, and it refers to the forthcoming PCI DSS version 3, and the quote is from Jeremy King, who's a friend of mine, used to be with MasterCard, but he runs the PCI standards all in the UK. At long last, they're starting to get it in terms of PCI. Have many of you encountered PCI within your businesses? So, a few yeses. Are you certified against PCI? May I ask? Or has it cost you an awful lot of money to become compliant to it? Because unlike many of the security initiatives, PCI DSS is like an MOT test. You pass or fail on certain criteria, and potentially qualified security assessors tell you whether you do or you don't. And some of them, in the earlier days, didn't fully understand how certain systems work, particularly those on mainframes, because one of the things that PCI used to say, I'm not sure that it does now, is that you can only do one function per server. Well, that's great, but in this joined-up age in cloud computing, don't think it's that compatible, and it certainly isn't with mainframe processing, with logical partitioning and all of those sorts of things. But that's good, because they're getting more towards the risk-based approach and involving people and some flexibility. I think PCI DSS version 2002, when we did a comparison, has about 224 controls in it, but I'm not going to argue that point because it depends how you split out some of the sub-points as to how many controls you think there really are. So, 3 different observations on security from Bill Gates, the business-orientated view, more of a technical view on the top left, and very much more the business management consultancy view about what you should be paying your attention to. So, 15 years ago, it was almost certainly an IT-related issue, and not that many industries were that involved. It was, well, banks had to do it, but retailers didn't particularly. There was no accepted view on what good looked like. There is now. It became a wider topic of conversation. I'm amused by the comments about it's a board-level responsibility. I was working with Kinetic in around about 2002, and we were saying that about information security. Do many of you run security awareness programs? Yeah. Started off, again, 10 years or so ago. It used to be mouse mats, screensavers, posters here, there and everywhere. Fine. Pens and so on and so forth. Equally then turned to computer-based training, which in many cases was relatively sterile. I tried to get an initiative where I could get every member of staff 1 hour's face-to-face security awareness training per 3 years. I think that's too low. Probably it certainly is now, but it was 10 years ago. And I failed miserably because they costed that over 6,000 people at 20 per session, and you need a full-time person doing it, and so on and so forth. Now the terminology, as Alan has adequately put forward, is cybersecurity. What has changed in the last 5 years is that these expectations and influences have risen materially. I think the laptop problem that Nationwide encountered cost them 900,000 rather than 1.3 million. You got a 30% discount for holding your hands up to it. But what on earth was customer data doing on a support person's laptop? You've got a more difficult job than I had on a full-time basis because the subject area has expanded rapidly. It's pervasive. I mean, because of my background, I looked at where credit cards are used, credit and debit cards are used. And I suspect quite a number of you have had a card cloned. Certainly my wife did. Anybody else had a credit card cloned? I doubt whether it particularly worried you if it's a credit card, because you know it's all going to be frozen and it carries on somewhere else. If it's your debit card, it's a different story, because there's certainly a view that you have a debit card compromised twice in 1 year, you'll leave the bank that issued that card, and it's meant to be a whole lot easier based on what's happened a week or so ago these days. You've also got a lot of alphabet soup to do within the whole subject of IT, cyber security, all the products, data prevention. I always thought it was a digital light projector, but things of that nature. ATM is asynchronous transfer mode. It's also advanced teller machine where you get your money in. There's also this confusion about how you address this subject. All the way from the shop floor or the office floor, all the way to the top of the organisational tree. So, I'm here to try and share some of my experiences and try and eliminate some of that confusion, or some of the things that helped me, some we won, some we didn't, and see what you think. So, I think the business drivers in the private sector make a profit, be ahead or better of your competitors. Certainly in Barclays' case, it tried that with Pingit. I was running the security engineering team, and my guys actually had the job of trying to make an inherently insecure device, the mobile phone, actually secure. You can't. Not completely. So you've got to deal with risk-based information security. I mean, give you an example. Do many of you use these pin sentry devices? That's the original old Barclays one. Doesn't look very endearing. That's a Mark II version. It's a lot neater and much smaller form factor. What the industry really needed to do, rather than produce that, was to get somebody like Apple to make it cool in terms of the colours, and nobody would really have a problem with that. The point I'm going to make is, as soon as you put the app that does this, or pertains to do this, onto a mobile phone, think what you're doing. This is freestanding, you can kick it around, it doesn't cost a lot of money, but it's got a much reduced attack surface compared to a mobile phone. And somebody will go after it, depending on whose mobile phone it is. So a lot of people, they want to provide and enhance organisation services in a timely manner, so people want to reduce the cost of those things to put it all in one place. I also saw some stats that said about 70% of apps on smartphones are never ever used by most consumers, so I'm not sure whether they'll actually be here in about 8-9 years old, but in time. Use technology to do things in new ways or at lower cost. Well, quite frankly, that's what online banking applications and all the various generations of retailer websites have been doing. The banks couldn't actually service their customers through their branch networks because there aren't enough of them. NatWest proved that a year or so ago in the IT problem that they had. Whether it's a security problem or not, we don't know. What I do know is, in terms of expectations of risk management, I bet you no IT project risk assessment had over 170 million as the consequences, because that's what they've said it's cost them. You've got to be compliant to applicable legislation and secure in the eyes of your customers, because everybody says automatically that's what I want. So, you invariably need custom data and the accepted information security words for those three. Old faithfuls. I use two more, and have used those for the last 7 years. Operability and sustainability, because you're always changing something. And in terms of PCI DSS, if you take whether you're a utility with rates payments and things of that nature, you're only one change request away from non-compliance. It's interesting about the personal data. I can remember, and I'm going back a few years, there used to be the mobile phone top-up transaction. Only a small change to the system, about 10 days of effort to get it implemented. What did you got? You've got the card number, you've got the postcode, you've got the person's name, and a few other bits and pieces. Absolute crackerjack for identity takeover. Quite a long list. It certainly isn't only a technical matter. Unfortunately, I had the misfortune to have many security investigations of staff taking place. At some stages, it was over a dozen simultaneously. That's in an organisation of about 5,000 or 6,000. Lots of reasons for that. Changing mix from permanent to contract staff. That's not saying they were any more. They weren't aware of what they were doing. It was cool to actually take these things out. I've got a few nods from around so people were aware of it. The more flexible and adaptable you make the workforce, basically that's why the percentage you have to put towards security in terms of goes up. And equally, in the economic circumstances that most organisations have found for the last 4 or 5 years, the investment in security has got to go up, which is counterintuitive to the fact we're not doing any more business than we were doing. We just displaced it and moved it somewhere else. IT systems are always going to have unknown bugs, and they've also got a number of technical deficiencies where we couldn't justify spending that amount of money with that amount of extra elapsed time. Within a very large organisation like the one I was, I've seen numerous organisational culture or cultures between different parts of the business. Marketing certainly have a different view on compared to obviously the risk managers. 'Twas ever thus, but you've got to get it into balance. Cultures quickly change because as soon as you've had an incident, we've got to do something about that, particularly if it happens twice at least. But improving cultures takes a long time to achieve, potentially a couple of years, I would suggest, in a large organisation when you're in thousands. I'll come to third parties a bit more later. Security incidents can be an opportunity to influence your partner posture. Did anybody see the Heartland breach in the States, which was massive in terms of Wi-Fi? They're an acquirer in the States, and they're now actually, and they even tried to sell me more secure pin entry devices. I don't think they got into marketing security products until after. So, but it was a nice try. We decided we didn't do it. You've got to have sustained commitment to adequate security. You want that right from the top. I know it's fairly banging the traditional drum. And your approach has got to be realistic, because if you're not in a very good posture now, don't allocate X £100,000 that we're going to sort it all out in the first 6 months of 2014. You won't be able to spend the money wisely enough. So, what happens when unexpected security events happen? It's considered an incident, possibly even a crisis, if business survival is threatened. How do you assess the scale and impact? Can you contain it? There was one quite a few years ago. Wasn't an incident, but remember when Nectar first launched, and that was Sainsbury's, Debenhams, Barclaycard, and BP. It crashed. I know websites still crash because Lloyd's, when the Lloyd's TSB one couldn't quite handle the load a week or so ago. But we suddenly found out we couldn't go and help them out. And guess whose brands it was that were going to be the sufferer? If it's a security incident, it'll probably be on Twitter and all over the Facebook and the web before you even know about it now. Lloyd's found that out last year on internet banking. You're going to have executive attention, but only for a while if it's containable, and that only for a while is a matter of days. Facts, knowledge, logic and ownership often in short supply. And then we go back to, in a lot of cases, configuration control, service management, change control. Actually, well, yeah, we always thought we were going to look after those logs, but we didn't bother. And now we need to, because we haven't got them. It is even more challenging when your partners and processes are involved, because and if you have to reach for the contract, that's a great pity, because you're all lost. Remediation can be protracted, possibly a couple of years to recover. I even looked at, for those of you that probably went for the Apple Maps application of a year ago, and it was sending you down the wrong road, literally. Apparently they've put an awful lot of money into it over the course of the last whole year now. But some people are still saying, well, I might stick to Google Maps because it isn't sorted yet. So there's a few examples. The likelihood is now your third parties will hold some of your sensitive data. They may be processing for you. I mean, all sorts of. I can remember marketing companies where we outsourced some lists to go things, and the marketing company was actually an umbrella for going down to third, fourth, fifth, and sixth level parties. What we didn't know. That's going back 8-10 years. What do you know about their emphasis? Do you take a standard or a bespoke services? Do you share any of those factors with other people? How dependent on them are you really? Can you go anywhere else, and in what period of time? If it's not a commodity product. When did you do due diligence, and how far down did you look? Because I actually got told, well, we haven't been asked these questions before, and we process for bank A, B, C and D, so it's all right, isn't it? You ain't going to look any further. Well, sorry, we did. So, what you're going to do is quite complex. A lot more complicated than I tell you. Won't get any simpler. You've got to take the overarching view and take the gentleman's point inside and outside, because there's no absolute dividing line. You need to proactively manage it from the top with good, and recalibrate it regularly. And you're going to ask me what regularly is, so I'm going to answer that one. I would say between 3 and 6 months, and things are going to change. The relative priorities. I used to go to the seaside and used to throw balls up these little horse racing things, and they go across at different rates. You will get scope creep and all sorts of things. It's inevitable, so you've got to plan for it in your program. If you have a separate IS or cybersecurity organisation, again, they will have to move with the subject matter, and it's moving rapidly. And compliance is more important going forward because, all right, it may be PCI DSS, but it is your customers. The first time I was asked to respond to a request from a PLC customer of are we compliant to 27001 was about 2003, so that's 10 years ago. What might help you? Well, I also thought, but I didn't want to put them in, luck, experience and skills will actually also help out. Meld them all together, and what you're going to get is practical, not PPI, because that's very costly, practical and pragmatic program management. Why is it so difficult? Many of the core elements of banking systems, government systems are between 10 and 20 years old. But the new sexy stuff that's all got Java and all these other things, it isn't. Those new delivery channels need to change pretty regularly. I'm almost out of time, so I'm going to have to go pretty quick. So, mobile apps are changing literally every other week, possibly once a month. But end-to-end transaction flows, to do what you've always done fairly simply, using a registration of a mobile phone to ping it and things like that, there are about 40-odd processing different discrete IT steps in that. And quite frankly, a mobile phone is a transient device. People have them and they chuck them away after a year or two to get the next best one. The original e-commerce apps also duplicated lots of customer data. That's made getting compliant a hell of a lot worse. And UK PLC, period, is hopeless at data classification with a few notable exceptions. PCI DSS wants you to go down the least privileged route for access control and also storage of data. But it's going to cost millions in some of the big processing systems to deal with this, which is why. But customer aggregation or customer views, which have been very attractive over the last about the last 5 years actually, they also make it all a honeypot for the hackers and people with. So, but you don't have to do it yourself these days. 10 years ago you did. I would suggest that you tailor and maintain what you do to your business. They're not all going to be the same. Ensure that it becomes part of the DNA of your organisation at all levels, and that's the point about phishing, and test yourselves and act on the result. Because if you test yourselves, then you can say what we've done, what we spent the money on, and you will get the finance director, you've got a better chance of getting the finance director to say, yes, I'm going to carry on sponsoring this. So, attitudes have changed. You've got to take an inclusive approach for your organisation and also the data you bring in from outside. You're now necessary to protect more data than you ever did before. Make sure what you're doing is relevant to you. Particularly, for example, you do M&A and you take somebody over and you try and weld two businesses together. If you get 2 or 3 lots of breach, I think a lot of businesses are going to be sunk unless they're very big. And don't think it's just your production systems, because it's not, but your culture is critical. So, that's what I said I was going to talk about. Thank you for listening.
I'm going to take us through the role of standards in information security. Hopefully with an healthy injection of humour maybe, possibly some interest certainly. I'm going to ask, what is the cybersecurity challenge? We're going to look at the changing standards landscape. Michael's already referred to the fact that certainly ISO 27001 gets revised and updated and is due publication soon, and what that means for organisations that might have adopted it. We'll come on to that towards the end of the session. We'll look at how those standards go about addressing the cybersecurity threat, whatever that might be, and then, as I say, turn on to 27001. Before I get into the properly, can you tell me, just by raising your hands, how many of you have an ISMS structured around a standard at present? And of those with their hands in the air, how many have adopted 27001 as opposed to any other standard and have certification? Nearly, maybe, in some cases. Okay, thank you. That will help if all now the presentation goes forward, I hope. And the appeal of 27001 should hopefully spread around the room. Who knows? We'll see. So, cyber security. First off, what is cyber security? Well, there's a number of standards that define cyber security. And to be honest, they're not consistent. They've got slightly different focuses, slightly different interpretations and meanings. If you think of the phrase Internet of Things, Internet of Things is a phrase which is increasingly being talked about in cybersecurity standards and discussion groups and committees. It refers to, or the concept of, any item that has a unique address, network address, that could be connected to the internet. Cybersecurity starts to consider those issues and what could be affected if there's a security breach, the confidentiality, the integrity, the availability associated with those items, if they were compromised. So let's just think about the Internet of Things for a moment. What sorts of connected items in the domestic abode could be affected? Lights, music, heating. We keep hearing that all these things are going to be connected going forwards, and that you can control them by, say, your iPhone or some app on your Android device. Well, if that becomes compromised, what's the impact of that? That could be quite scary, couldn't it? Gates to your drive being opened, unlocked, gates to your house, doors to your house potentially, the heating, the freezer. I'm trying to think of the worst case scenario. It might be the music system, I don't know, someone external to the house taking over the music system and forcing us to listen to, I don't know, Justin Bieber for 24/7. That's enough to scare me. It certainly gets me sat up and thinking about what do I actually want to connect to the internet. Maybe not quite so much. There's some other definitions, and these kind of extend this Internet of Things concept for us to consider and just start to appreciate how they might apply to the commercial enterprise and the security associated with it. This particular definition of these comments here coming from PAS 555, a standard produced by a consortium of interested organisations relating to cyber security, particularly aligned with the public sector. I'll come back to PAS 555 and what it means shortly. Michael just made reference to the fact that the government is looking at cyber security through the supply chain, particularly with regards to small organisations and smaller entities that are in that supply chain. Indeed, at the moment, they're going through a consultation exercise, and they have invited standards representatives to promote their preferred option. And part of the framework within which that presentation is to be made includes these definitions. The definition of a standard, a reference point, a common understanding of a stance or a scenario. The point being that they have identified that the reliance on supply chain security is significant. If your suppliers let you down, as we saw in the last presentation, if your suppliers let you down, then you're going to be struggling. The danger is it's your reputation that's going to be dragged through the mud or put on the front page of the Mail on Sunday in some cases. So how do organisations control this? Well, this is where various organisations adopt different approaches. The most common approach, in my experience, is simply to rely on terms and conditions. Terms and conditions of a contract or a purchase order. A confidentiality clause, maybe. Maybe that suffices. How effective do you think that really is? Certainly for myself, I liken it to, say, a license, a user license for a piece of software I might download to a personal machine over the weekend, say, on a Saturday morning, start downloading a piece of software, it comes up with a user license, and of course I read through it line by line. Anything I don't understand, I'll make a note of, so I'll go back and query that. Anything I'm not happy to sign up to, I'll make a note of that as well. Then I contact the people who have offered me the license and the piece of software and get them to clarify it, get them to change it where I'm not going to accept it, and then I'll think about, once they've come back, yeah, of course I don't. Absolute rubbish. Do you actually read through the license? No. Straight down the bottom, accept, accept, accept. Get on with it. I want to get on with using the software tool, playing with it, whatever it's designed to do. I don't actually read through the license. I liken that to the terms and conditions scenario. And I'm sorry, that could be a cynical viewpoint, but my experience suggests it's not too far from the truth. We have IT governance. We have a rather large organisation in the northwest of England where we're contracted to do supply chain audits for them. We're contracted to deliver supply chain audits for them. As we were finalising negotiations, they sent us their terms and conditions. I read through them and I had to go back to them and say, sorry, we can't sign those terms and conditions. Huge organisation. They turned around to us and said, sorry, you IT governance, well, all bets are off then, you're not getting a contract. I said, well, bear with me just 1 minute. Just look at these two clauses in your contract. They contradict each other in your own terms and conditions. How are we meant to sign up to these? And then they gave me a few more minutes and I explained how actually it didn't relate to the work we were going to be doing. Those terms and conditions didn't give them the assurance, the security they were looking for through the supply chain, in our case. In the end, they come to a conclusion or ask the question, okay, so how did our other suppliers sign up to these terms and conditions? And that's the indicator that for me says terms and conditions isn't necessarily the most robust way of managing cyber security or information security through the supply chain. So what are the other options? Well, some organisations like to rely on security questionnaires. They send out a security questionnaire to their potential suppliers and ask typically 133, 134 questions. There's a reason for that number, I'll come back to it. But they ask 133, 134 questions, and basically the salesperson filling it in knows that if they answer yes, 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 you get the idea, they're more likely to get the contract. If they answer no, 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 it's unlikely they're going to get the contract. How much weight do you think you can put on that? I'm not so sure. The approach with the questionnaire, of course, is not particularly heavy on the customer in the relationship. The customer has to prepare the questionnaire, send it out, hopefully notice when they get the questionnaire back. Even better, look at the questionnaire and interpret it and work out what degree of assurance, what security does that potential supplier offer through their responses to the questionnaire. The supplier has to fill out the questionnaire, maybe even provide some supporting evidence to give some weight to their responses and answers. But as I've already implied, the degree of assurance associated with this, I would suggest, is not as robust as we might like. There are, of course, other options, one of which might be going and conducting a supplier audit, actually auditing your suppliers and their security stance. Great, sounds good. A couple of problems with that. One is it's more onerous on the customer in the relationship. The customer has to develop an audit team, retain that the skills and the expertise required to go and audit their suppliers. You need the time, the travel, the expenses involved with that. There's also pressure on the supplier in this relationship to make the time available to answer the auditor's questions and ideally respond to any findings that are raised as well. It can be a rather expensive approach, but the good news is that the degree of assurance it provides is pretty robust. You get to see the exact controls in place, the exact arrangements, the exact environment in which the data that you're entrusting your supply chain with is held and protected. But it's expensive. So is there somewhere a middle road between these two? Well, I'm going to suggest there is, and that's what I'm going to refer to as accredited certification. I'll explain what that phrase means in just a moment. But accredited certification is where you get an independent, recognised audit body award a certificate saying, yes, the supplier in the relationship adheres to a standard, a framework, a practice, common practice that everyone can refer to. In this case, the customer has some work to do. Hopefully, they know they need to ask for that certificate as evidence of the supplier's control stance or security arrangements. Hopefully, they know how to interpret that certificate also. It puts most of the cost, the time, the effort onto the supplier. They need to develop their security arrangements and pay for the pleasure of being audited by a recognised audit body. The amount of assurance provided, it's not as robust, and it never will be as robust as going and doing your own supplier audit. But there is a degree of assurance provided there. And because it's an independent audit body, it goes well beyond the supplier questionnaire, and certainly well beyond the terms and conditions approach, I'd suggest. Looking at the term accredited certification, just to make sure we all have a common understanding of the scope of the appeal of such a scheme. I'm just going to talk briefly about how such schemes work. And this could apply to a myriad of standards. They all work in a similar means if it's an accredited certification scheme. So your organisation, or indeed ours, IT Governance, we are seeking certification. And I'm pleased to say, you don't expect it, we do have certifications 27001 and 11001. Hopefully that's not too much of a shock. But we therefore subject ourselves to an audit by a certification body. There are a wide selection of certification bodies out there, all have their own particular little traits or characteristics. Those certification bodies, if they are part of this worldwide recognised scheme, are put through an accreditation process. And that is where a national accreditation body, starting at the far right, UCAS in the UK, but there's a network of national accreditation bodies around the globe. In this case, we've got America, France, Germany, Spain, Ireland and Portugal represented on the screen there. The national accreditation bodies assess and accredit the certification bodies to ensure that they're all operating to a consistent framework, a common approach, that they're competent and they make decisions, certification decisions that have weight and confidence associated with them within this worldwide framework. The national accreditation bodies all sign up to the IAF, the International Accreditation Forum, which basically means they all they're subject to each other's peer review and they all recognise each other's accreditations. Therefore, if you are an organisation at the end of the chain here who has a certificate issued by, say, SGS, and it's accredited by UCAS, and you demonstrate that to an organisation in Australia, they know that it's part of this worldwide scheme and offers the same assurance as a certificate issued by a local certification body in Australia that's accredited by an IAF member. In the UK, I should add that UCAS is effectively licensed or set up under charter from the government. There is only one national accreditation body per nation. That might sound obvious, but worth mentioning all the same. Coming back to cyber security standards, part of the challenge I think for any organisation out there, whichever framework or reference point we're going to use to try and demonstrate our stance to both ourselves and our board and our C-suite, but also to our suppliers. There are a number of reference points we could go to. Looking at some of these on the screen, PCI DSS, just heard that that's quite particularly focused around payment card, specifically focused around payment card scenarios. PAS 555 represented in the middle there is a standard that's very outcome focused, rather than a specification for a set of processes and a way of operating and managing as information security styles. It defines a set of outcomes. It's then down to the organisation to determine how it's going to deliver those. There's various others on here. IASME, to the bottom left here, is designed specifically for very small organisations. IASME itself represents itself as being a stepping stone towards 27001. It's run by a small group of individuals who operate out of the Malvern security cluster. There's various others. The ISF's Standard of Good Practice, which claims to incorporate other frameworks such as CODIT, NIST, etc., and factor them all into a common set of controls and approach. And of course we have 27001. 27001, as I've said, is changing, and I'm going to suggest that the new version offers a degree of flexibility that would enable organisations that have preferences around these other standards to indeed still consider 27001. That will become hopefully obvious as we go through the next few minutes. First off, those that have adopted 27001 right now may well recognise this structure. It's the structure of ISO 27001 as it is today. The new version of the standard, which by the way is due for publication on the 1st of October, not far away, moves into a consistent or common management system format. ISO as a standards body has identified that organisations typically adopt more than a single management system standard. And so they've come up with this consistent format referred to as Annex SL to enable organisations adopting 2, 3, maybe 4 or more ISOs to read across between them in a manner that should enable interpretation and application in an integrated approach. What else is changing in 27001-2013? Those that are familiar with it will know that it's based on a Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle. Well, the 2013 version of the standard no longer mandates a Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle. It enables organisations to determine their own broad approach to information security management systems and implementing it, whether it's through Kaizen or indeed still using Plan, Do, Check, Act or any other approach they may wish to adopt. Those that have lived through the pain of an asset-based risk assessment, I've used a chocolate muffin here as being the asset, but hey, that's up to you. It's all about protecting the assets. Well, that's still the case to an extent, but the requirement for an asset-based risk assessment has been removed. You still need to do a risk assessment, and indeed an asset-based one would satisfy the requirements of the 2013 version of 27001. The area where it's really been enhanced and bolstered is around performance management and the effectiveness of the information security management system, not only in satisfying your own internal needs as part of an organisation, but in satisfying the needs of interested parties outside of the organisation, including suppliers, I might suggest. So performance management is being bolstered. Other changes is that the standard says that when it comes to risk treatment, you are no longer confined to looking at Annex A. Annex A being a framework, a selection, a catalogue of security controls that you can read down and apply to treat the risks you've identified. So 27001 now says you can pick any framework you want. Indeed, you can choose to make up your own security controls. The requirement is that you then compare these to those controls detailed in Annex A to make sure you haven't omitted any, but you do not have to default to Annex A. Having said that, at the same time, Annex A of 27001 has also been reviewed and overhauled, and there's some changes there as well, which you might recognise if I was to tell you these are the categories that Annex A is now split into. Those that are familiar with Annex A and possibly the 133 security question supplier questionnaire format, we'll be pleased to see it's likely to reduce to 114 going forwards. Sorry, is that a cynical step too far maybe? But it's 114 controls, split into 14 categories. The key differences being A5 right at the start, information security policies, now reflects the fact that it's not a single policy, it's a combination of policies that enable you to manage information security. Cryptography, it's a new category, they're not actually new controls, they've just been pulled from other areas of the standard and combined into a heading in its own right to give it a slightly more logical and complete structure. Operations security and communication security have been split out, and supplier relationships has been added in, largely taken from what used to be A6.2, if anyone's particularly familiar with the control structure, largely pulling from that, but definitely reflecting this supply chain reliance on security stance. So I'm going to suggest that any organisation looking for cyber security to ensure it sells and its customers needs to be looking for some sort of reference point that offers a management system that enables you to manage your security stance going forwards, your cyber security stance going forwards. That includes getting feedback from what's going on. How's the ISMS or the security stance performing and supporting the organisation? Using that feedback to inform the way forward, inform management decisions and the focus. It needs to align to both internal and external drivers, not just what the management, the organisation, the owners, the stakeholders want, but the clients beyond that, the regulators in the sector, etc. And factor all those in together. And if you're looking for worldwide accepted, accredited certification also, there's only one scheme I'm aware of that truly offers that. So that's all embodied in one particular scheme, and that is the ISO 27001 accredited certification scheme. That's effectively the a summary of what I wanted to cover.
So when I agreed to give this talk a couple of weeks ago, I started having to think about what I was going to talk about and how I was going to present what we've done and how we approach information security. And I kind of had this vision of ISO 27001. It's something that our customers have requested for various reasons we'll get onto later. And looking at it as a great big monolithic certification, something that has to be climbed, something that has to be scaled. And it's all about ticking the boxes and this great big sort of monolithic process to go through. However, when I looked at it sort of in more detail and had to think about it in more detail and what the real effect of ISO 27001 has been on Eagle Genomics business, is the mountain is not ISO 27001. Information security is the mountain. ISO 27001 is the guidebook and the diary of how you're going to approach it, how you're going to climb this mountain, how you're going to secure your data. And another thing that really struck me, having been through this process as an SME, was really that how were the processes involved in ISO 27001, this very big process-driven certification, going to really impact on Eagle's business. Eagle, of course, is a young startup company. We're very agile. We like these agile processes. And this is sort of the lean startup idea that you don't do anything unless it's absolutely in the customer interest and the customer requirement to do it. When I started looking at the way that ISO 27001 is structured versus some of these lean development and agile development methodologies, and you find that the core iterative process of the way these things fit together are really quite similar. So ISO 27001, plan, do, check out. Lean development, lean manufacturing, define, measure, improve, control. So these things are actually fairly synergistic with each other. And that's really what we found over the past 12 months of implementing ISO 27001 is it's not this great big monolithic thing to climb and to scale. It's actually something that can really help you adapt to information security, something that can be really core reacts to those to those sorts of issues. Human genomes, individual health information. There are regulations. There are strong regulations. HIPAA in the US, for example. If you're going to use these data, this information in pharmaceutical clinical trials to develop pharmaceuticals, you've got a whole load of other regulations. These are mainly US focused because our customer base is mainly US focused. In this case, 21 CFR Part 11. If you're going to use them for an in vitro diagnostic test, watch out. You've got this sort of IEC 62304, which is the most unbelievable. The level of detail that goes into in terms of a regulation is massive. And of course, all of these laws change between territories, and that can really affect where you can put these data. So can you put data generated in the EU, in the US, on US systems? So where we got to about 18 months ago was a realisation that to progress our business, we're going to need to pay close attention to information security management. We're going to need to give our customers confidence that we understand this and we're looking after their data correctly. And what we came to was ISO 27001. It's systematic. There's hundreds of controls, 133 controls or 114 controls depending on the particular standard. You need to implement change management, so any time you change your software configuration or the way you handle data, that has to go through a process. And incident reporting, but really most importantly is continuous improvement. It is looking at this, looking at the overview of what you're doing now and saying, this is what we can improve, this is how we can alter these systems to make them best, to make them more secure. And if you're looking again at lean approaches, you will then be saying that being very much customer driven. The fast track service, from IT governance, this is the Sherpa, if you like, the guide that has taken us through the process, has been a very, very good experience indeed. And that is the other part of the toolkit that we really rely on and we carry on with a very good relationship with IT governance moving forwards.